Hafaday and good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome back from recess. Thank you for your patience. We've been having some technical difficulties this afternoon, but hopefully we'll be able to proceed. So we left off again this morning at on second reading. We're now on bill number 215-37 COR. Senator Kanata, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. Bill 215-37 COR, I move to place Bill 215-37 COR, sponsored by Senator Roy A.B. Kanata and co-sponsored by Senator Joe S. San Augustine, which is an act to amend subsection 1903E to Chapter 19, Title 1, Guam Code Annotated, and to amend subsection 30101, Chapter 30, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to election and qualification process for offices of the Public Auditor and the Attorney General, into the third reading file, and I'd like to speak on the bill.
Please proceed.
Bill 215-37 aims to amend the election qualification processes that impact the races for the Office of Public Auditor and the Attorney General Guam, as recommended by Guam Election Commission. This Bill 215-37 reduces the government of Guam's expenses by ensuring that all certified candidates have their names listed on the ballot for the general election, and the candidate for the highest number of votes as certified by the Guam Election Commission will be declared the winner of the election. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I kindly ask for my colleagues' support this afternoon.
This is Masi, Senator Kanata. On the bill, is there any senator who would like to be recognized on the bill? Vice Speaker, you are recognized.
Situs Masi, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity. I do support the efforts of this measure, but just wanted to ask a clarification just to make sure. So on section page 2, sub-item E, line 19, all qualified candidates complying with the provisions shall be placed on the ballot for the Office of Public Accountability to be cast. Instead of the primary, it would be the general election, and that the candidate receiving the most votes, subject to the qualification established by, shall be certified by the Election Commission as having won the election for the position of the Public Auditor. That was, so the provision as stated here is deleting the A separate and then instead of primary general. And I want to say, was there any, I didn't see anything, was there any issues or concerns that were previously brought up on this issue?
Would the sponsor yield to the question?
Come again. What was the last part of your question?
Were there any issues of concerns that were brought up by the general public? So instead of it having a primary, that it goes straight to the election?
None that I recall, but I do have an amendment that has been drafted by legal that we will entertain to kind of, I guess, clarify some of the questioning at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Barnett, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to a point of inquiry.
Please state your point of inquiry.
I know that the bill intends to eliminate the printing of the ballot during the primary election, but does the author have any idea how much that cost is?
Would the author yield to that question?
I don't know it right off the bat, but I can get clarification.
Okay, because I too am just trying to understand the impetus or the intent for this bill, and maybe the author. So what if we have, 3 people running for public auditor, multiple candidates for AG? Just to what purpose do we serve by eliminating the primary election for these offices?
You asking for the sponsor to yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Sorry, come again?
Are we doing it to save money, or, you know, what's the reason behind it?
Yes, we are trying to save money, and also this was a recommendation by the commission, the Guam Election Commission. The intent for the legislation is to push them into the general election, and that all parties would be entertained because it's a nonpartisan race.
Okay. Okay. But we don't know yet how much money we would save?
Stan.
Thank you. Oh, the fiscal note. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll look at that. Sudaswasi.
On the bill, Senator Brown, you're recognized on the bill.
Madam Speaker, if I can just give a point of information, it's 13,000, and it would reduce the time also for tabulation during a primary election, so that all the time for tabulation would just be focused in the general election. Does that satisfy the okay, and sorry, Senator Joanne, you're...
Thank you, Senator. Senator Brown, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I know we recognize the position of the Attorney General and the Public Auditor and nonpartisan positions, but I wanted to ask, is it going to be a simple majority in terms of how the votes are going to be calculated? Because you could have, these votes spread over 3, 5, or more candidates. So is it just simple majority, whoever has the most votes, or is there a certain percentage required as they are in the gubernatorial race?
Are you asking the sponsor to yield?
Yes, if the sponsor
would the sponsor
will
yield to that question?
Yes, ma'am. It is by a majority vote. The candidate receiving the most votes, subject to the qualifications established by this chapter, shall be certified by Guam Legislature Commission as having won the election in the position of public auditor.
And that is currently the case now?
No.
Well, what is the previous requirement?
It
would
the sponsor yield?
have a primary, and then now there would be we're just pushing it into the general election. So the primary the primary candidates would be just pushed into the general election, and then they would be entertained in that general election.
Madam Speaker, I just want to clarify to verify, is there any requirement for percentage that needs to be met in order to be elected? Because, we can end up having a situation of votes divided among, like I said, could be 4, could be 5 candidates, 6 candidates, 7. And they get elected by a nominal amount of votes simply because they have one vote over their competitor, but not even a simple majority in terms of getting elected. That, I don't know if I'm too comfortable with that. Then you end up having an individual elected by a very small section of the population versus what we would look at as really, a majority vote of or at least half of the 50% requirement. For those that participate in the election. So I have reservations about that simply because we've seen recent elections where we've had, and wonderful, I think the more the merrier. But I have concern about someone getting elected by such a small majority if the votes get spread out too thinly versus narrowing down who the potential top 2, for example, are. And then we actually have better representation of the voters in terms of who they're actually selecting. Is that something the sponsor could respond to?
My apologies.
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
My apologies, Madam Speaker, and to the previous speaker. I would like to clarify, GEC just stated that it's plurality, not majority. I was mistaken. Does that satisfy the previous speaker?
She also asked another question. Would you?
Well, I just want to make sure because I don't want to be in a situation, if it's not simple majority, and a candidate's required to receive a certain percentage of the vote, we could end up having another special election after the general election. I don't know. I'm kind of like, I think we all like to have a day rest after the general election and know who the candidates are and move on. Get ready for the holidays and move on into the next year. I don't like extending elections even when I wasn't a candidate. I think people just say, okay, election season's over, take the signs down, and let's move on. So I just want to clarify that, because if they're required to receive a certain percentage, I think we might be spreading ourselves too thin if we simply end up having, have them all run at once and then end up having another election after the general election. I think that's going to cost far more than $13,000. And again, we're probably, as we've seen in previous special elections, you don't really get an overwhelming turnout. Our people kind of aim for that big day in November and then they want to move on. So I think we cannot, we think we're solving one problem, but we could be creating another challenge that's even more expensive. So I think we need to be mindful of that if that's indeed the case. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Brown. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? Vice? Anyone else on the bill?
On the main motion, I'm going to recognize Speaker Therese Chirlahi. You may proceed.
Jesus Masi. I want to thank the author for the bill. I do, however, want to discuss a few points that I guess I either want to clarify or just raise some concerns. The first one is, so it was clarified earlier that the reason we're doing this is to get rid of the public auditor or the attorney general on a primary election ballot. That would save us, the government of Guam, $12,500 or $13,000 a year, every 4 years for that particular election. That's okay, I guess. It's not that compelling to me. The amount is not that big, but removing them from a primary because they are nonpartisan, I don't object to. That's fine. My only issue is I would like to see these candidates for public auditor and attorney general be vetted the same way all other candidates are vetted. All other candidates have to be vetted. It looks to me, well, we're currently 90 days before the primary election. But this bill would change and make public auditor and attorney general candidates not have to file until 60 days before the primary election, which is a whole month of learning who these candidates are and trying for the electorate to decide which one they want to vote on. I don't know, but for me, 60 days feels very short. For me, even myself, with experience to try to get my message out there in 60 days is going to be short, let alone to get the constituency to hear the candidates. Or, I don't know, but we've seen long campaigns. We are able to flesh out several issues, not just one or two, but really several. And so that's one concern I have. I would prefer that we change instead of no later than 60 days before the general election and no earlier than 130 days before the election, that they be required to file, just like now, 160 days before, or no earlier than 160 days and no later than 90 days. And so I'm hoping the sponsor might consider that as an amendment. And then we talked about who's going to win the election. So currently, the way the law reads is that the public auditor or the attorney general candidates, they run in a primary, and the top two, they proceed to the general, and we pick from the top two. And it doesn't matter how many votes they have, but the one with the most votes wins. That's how it is now. That's how it's going to be after this. But there will be no selection of top two, and then, you know, you weigh the two. It's just going to be all 5 of them, or however many there are, all going into one election, one single day to really decide. And if we had a lot of candidates, as one of the previous speakers, you know, speculated, it's very possible you're going to win with much less than a majority of the voters in that election, but you will be the winner. This is not one of those offices where we put a percentage that you have to have in order to win. At least that's not in this bill. It was never in the original law either. And I don't know, it's just different, and it's different, and these elections are coming up very soon. So I just hope we can, if this bill passes, educate the public well in advance, get our candidates in advance so that the public has ample opportunity. You know, we have, I believe, it's harder to have forums for new candidates. It's very hard. We're down to one printed newspaper, even to run ads. It's hard for them to be interviewed because the media landscape has changed, and their opportunities to really be questioned about what they are going to do in office are very limited already. So I don't want to limit that anymore. So I guess my primary concern is, again, the one I stated earlier regarding the time frame. Right now, if I'm calculating correctly, we have 94 days between the primary and the general. So the primary in August and the general comes in November. That's 94 days. Even that is a long time. So that's why I feel like it should not be only 60 days where they get to declare. It should be longer than that. It should be at the very minimum 90 days. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? If not, I have Senator Roy I understand you have an amendment before you close?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
You may close it this time.
I would just like to give Speaker some time to review the amendment, if she would like. And if that satisfies her, then we can proceed with the amendment as is.
Senator Kanata, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Line 12, page 2, colleagues, I'm proposing an amendment to amend subsection 1903D of section 1 of the bill to read, quote, D, a candidate for the position of public auditor shall file his candidacy with the Guam Election Commission no earlier than 160 days before the general election and no later than 90 days before the general election.
On the amendment, is there anyone who'd like to speak on the amendment? If not, is there any objection to the amendment? Seeing no objection, amendment passes. Senator Kanata, you recognize on closing.
I would just like to move the bill to voting file.
Okay. On the motion to place the bill in the third reading file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. All right. Masi, we're now on bill number 216-37 COR. Senator Kanata, you are recognized. 216.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, colleagues, for your support in the previous amendments. I would move to to place Bill number 216-37 Core, sponsored by Senator Roy A.B. Canata and co-sponsored by Senator Joe S. San Augustine, which is an act to amend to 9112 of Chapter 9, Title 3, Guam Code, relative to the enforcement of electioneering at polling sites. This is into the third reading file, and I'd like to speak on the bill.
Please proceed.
Bill 216-37 aims to maintain the integrity of the electoral process and guarantee neutral space for voters. To ensure that to ensure a fair and unbiased voting environment, 100 feet of no electioneering zone is established around entrances and exit of all polling sites. The Guam Election Commission will be responsible for clearly marking the boundary, and if needed, the Guam Police Department may assist with the enforcement. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I kindly ask for my colleagues' support this afternoon.
Thank you, Senator. On the motion to place a bill in third reading, is there any senator who'd like to speak on the bill? Senator Taitigui, you're recognized on the bill.
Si Juice Mossing, Madam Speaker, I have a question to the author of the legislation, if he should yield.
Yield.
Question, Senator.
Thank you. There was a concern about the, where does the boundary begin of the 100 feet? You know, is it at the fence of a school, or is it at the door of where they walk in to vote? And that was one of the concerns that were brought up. So, you know, calculating the distance from the entrance or the gate. So is there anything that came up with regards to what really is it? Is it the fence of a school, or is it where they actually vote when you walk into the door, where the 100 feet begins?
Moments recess.
Would you like a recess?
Yes, may I ask for a recess, Madam Speaker? Sorry.
All right, we'll take a 1-minute recess. We're back from recess. Senator Kanata, would you yield to the question?
Yes, thank you for that recess, colleagues. And Madam Speaker, I would just like to clarify my colleague's inquiry earlier. It's from the exit and entrance of the gate. Entrance and exit of the gates, not the door of the school or the classroom.
I thank you, the author, for answering that question. But is the current law clear as to where that begins, the entrance of a fence? The current law now that we abide by? Because the law, you know, clearly says 100 feet, but it doesn't clarify to ensure that it begins at the entrance of a gate. Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure the current law is consistent. And then now what you're changing is just to make it clear, yeah.
Okay, noted. Madam Speaker, moment's recess, please.
Senator Taitigui, you have the floor.
Okay. So I asked my colleague from Barragata, right? Is it Barragata? I think it's Gigo Barragata, yeah. If he needs to ask the Guam Election Commission some questions, take a short break, but 1 minute, just 1 minute, Madam Speaker, if I may.
All right. 1-minute recess. We're back from recess. Senator Teichgui, you had the floor on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Allow the author of the legislation to, he received a call from the Election Commission, and he would like to yield to my question that I asked earlier, whether it's currently in law and exactly what the bill does. So yeah, I'd like to yield to him to explain. If I could, Madam Speaker.
Would the author yield?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the previous speaker. Yes, I would just like to clarify the position of this legislation. It is already in law that the polling sites are 100 feet from the entrance and exit of all school facilities or government facilities. So this is trying to bring in GPD to be available for GEC, and GEC will maintain management of the entrances of all polling sites and precincts for the 100 feet. Mark-offs.
Thank you for that, for the author of the legislation.
floor.
And Madam Speaker, that being said, of course, having Guam Police Department at all the precincts, it becomes very taxing. It's also very costly to do. But I asked the question during the public hearing whether there's funding available for the Guam Police Department to do this. And according to Marie, I think the amount might have been about like $44,000 to pay for Guam Police Department to provide this safety service during an election. And it's something that they actually do with the Guam Police Department already. But now by codifying it, it brings more comfort to the Guam Election Commission to be able to reach out to them knowingly, by law, statutory law, that the Guam Election Commission can call upon them in their need. Not like they don't have that service already, but they want it codified. Have no problem with it. Just make sure they have the funding to pay for the Guam Police Department, because we know they're very short, not just financially, but staff-wise. So thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to clarify this legislation.
Senator Teichgui, on the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? Senator Fisher, on the bill, you are recognized.
Thank you, ma'am. I too have some questions for the sponsor of the bill. Does my friend agree that the Guam Administrative Rules and Regulations, I'm specifically referring to 9111, do you agree that it prohibits solicitation of votes within 100 feet of a polling place?
Yes.
Okay. Do you also agree, sir, that 6 Guam Administrative Rules and Regulations 1209 says that enforcement of the 100-foot place restriction rests with the precinct officials and the Guam police officers?
Yes.
Do you also agree that polling place under Guam Administrative Rules and Regulations is defined as the whole area where voting takes place, including entire grounds of schools or other public buildings utilized as a polling place?
Yes.
Sir, in your estimation, for example, if Mauricio Martyr's Elementary School has a fence around its entire footprint that you could not solicit within 100 feet of Mauricio Elementary's footprint?
Yes.
And when I say footprint, I mean the place of, so it'll, or entrance.
The exit and entrance, yes.
Yes. And just to belabor the point, I know that GW, I think, is also a polling place.
Senator Fisher, I can't hear you. Thank you.
Can you hear me now, ma'am? Okay. Do you also agree, sir, that, just to belabor the point, GW High School, which I believe is also a polling place, has a very large campus embracing many, many acres of open space? Do you agree with it? Does my friend agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. And would you also agree that you may not solicit votes or electioneer within 100 feet of any spot of GW's campus?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, ma'am. It looks like the speaker disagrees with that. Ma'am?
That's correct.
All right. I'm sure we're going to hear her in a minute. Okay, but thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Smossy, Senator Fisher. On the bill. On the bill, is there anyone who'd like to speak on the bill? Senator Barnett.
I guess I'm now just wondering about the necessity of the bill. Because I was privy to an instance where someone had made a complaint about electioneering a few elections back when I was in the media, and I know the process is you notify the precinct officials, and then they in turn call the Guam Police Department, ma'am. So I'd just like to offer that. Nothing further. Senator Smossy.
Senator Smossy, Senator Barnett. On the bill. I'd just like to take a 1-minute recess. All right. We're back from recess, and I had asked if there was anyone else on the bill. There was no one, so we were going to allow the sponsor to close on the bill.
Just a point of clarification.
Senator Kanata, you may close on the bill. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a point of clarification. Earlier, my colleagues, one of my good friends from Ipan Talafofo, to my right, wanted to clarify the perimeter fence, and I would just like to clarify for the public listening and attending our hearing right now that the legislation proposed right now is to clarify exits and entrances of polling sites. So the entrance and the exit of a fenced property, not the entire perimeter and 100 feet from the perimeter. Okay? Thank you so much. I would like to move the bill to the voting file.
All right. On the motion to move the bill to the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. That was Bill 216. We're now on Bill number 217-37 COR. Senator Kanata, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill number 217-37, sponsored by Senator Roy A. B. Kanata, co-sponsored by Senator Joe S. Sanoxine, an act to amend subsection 14105 of Chapter 14, Title 3, Guam Code annotated relative to provisional ballots into the third reading file, and I'd like to speak on the bill.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill 217-37 brings forth the amendment to subsection 14105 of Chapter 14, aiming to provide clarity on the timeline for curing and counting provisional ballots. The proposed change provides that all provisional ballots should be addressed and accounted for in a prior to certification of an election and opposed to current deadline 10 days after the election. By implementing this measure, the Guam Election Commission will have ample time to thoroughly review and resolve all provisional ballots casted during the election. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? All right, on the bill, is there any senator who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Fisher, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The way I read this bill, because it requires prior to certification the commission to count provisional voters' choices, if the election commission fails to produce a quorum because we removed the 10-day requirement, we could go an indefinite amount of time without a certified election. Because we wouldn't have candidates filling the seats because there hasn't been certification, I can foresee a lot of mischief here if for some reason of the commission members, they just don't assemble a quorum. And, we'll just go over the abyss, I suppose. But I would just suggest to my colleagues that perhaps it would be better to maintain the trigger that would require them to do this in a time. And perhaps my friend will consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Barnett on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just had a couple questions for the author. If he could, similarly to the other question I had about the impetus for this bill, if he could maybe just explain in layman's terms for the viewing public what this bill does and how it changes what we're doing right now with the provisional ballots.
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
It was requested on the by the Guam Election Commission Board, and it was reviewed in their, I forgot the word, but what they do on the off season of elections. So they review the election operations and make recommendations, also along with purging names that are no longer voting. So when they're reviewing, they provide recommendations for the next election. The intent came from them, and it was requested by Guam Election Commission Board. Does that answer your question, sir?
Senator Barnett, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you to the bill's author. Yeah, I think I share Senator Fisher's concerns. You know, we're live in this election this year, and we've got a bunch of bills that look to be implemented in this election year, and this one to me just seems, the strike through within 10 days after any election does raise a lot of concern and question for me as well. Nothing further. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, any other senator on the bill? Senator Teitzke on the bill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the same concern and was listening intently to the response from the author of the legislation from the question that was asked by good Senator Barnett. And it didn't answer the question. It basically just said, Election Commission got together and decided to make this change. It doesn't say why did they make this change? What was causing it to either bottleneck this election? What was causing it that it didn't seem fair or just to the voting populace? That's the question I would like the author to answer. Not tell me that because the Election Commission just gave it to me and introduced the bill. We should know our bills, exactly what we're speaking on and why we're putting it forward. So if you can explain, in layman's terms, explain why this bill, other than the Election Commission wants it, what changes in it? What good is it going to help the voting populace? That's my question to the author of the legislation.
Would the sponsor yield?
Of course. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the previous senator for speaking on that. Again, I lost train of thought earlier. My apologies. The comparative election report was where the information for this legislation was provided. All senators were provided it, and I think it's also available online if anyone would like to review it. So, It would remove the strict 10-day rule and allow the commission as much time as reasonably possible to to properly vet all provisional ballots prior to certification of the election. Does that satisfy your question, Senator Tideway?
Senator Tideway, you have the floor.
No, no, it doesn't. It's just, why? Why take away the 10 days? That's the question. Why? What purpose is it going to serve? And what major change is this going to help the voting populace?
Moments recess, Madam Speaker, if I may.
1 minute recess. We're back from recess. Senator, I'm sorry, I forgot where we left off. I think we had asked to yield. Yeah, you had been asked to yield. Senator Kanata.
So again, I got clarification from Guam Election Commission. They are asking for these to be aligned with the provisional ballots to be aligned with the absentee ballots so that they have more time to review and clarify documentation if in the event that someone else's information isn't available to them right away. So they need time to clarify. Instead of the 10-day, they're gathering ballots at the post office at 5 o'clock. They have to go count the ballot on the 10th day at the 10th hour at 5:30. So they're asking for more time to ensure that they have clarity and ensure that the ballots are counted correctly and people are given enough time.
Senator Taitko, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I have great concern about this piece of legislation. Taking out a time frame has always, you know, one of my other colleagues had mentioned it, and I too have concerns because it just leaves you know, like a blank check that's open so they can basically do it whenever they want to. I mean, we got to put their feet to the fire too. I understand they work very hard, you know, every 2 years to do something like this put together, but the time frame, taking away a time frame, if 10 days is not enough time, then why don't we just increase it to 15 days instead of just giving a blank check? So, you know, I do have reservations on this legislation, and I'm hoping the author too as well, you know, may consider just making it 15 days, at least putting a time frame on it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there any other senator who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Brown, on the bill, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I just want to inquire of the author, how much time then are we talking about? The bill says it exists in law, I assume, because it's not underlined, that voters would have 7 days to provide the information to the Election Commission. So if we're removing the 10-day requirement, how long are we exactly extending it for? Because I don't see that in the bill. Are we just simply removing the 10 days and that's it? But what time frame are we setting?
We're just removing the 10-day requirement, but Guam Election Commission is still doing their job. They're going to get the votes counted and process all the ballots in the timely manner.
So then we're actually removing any time frame.
Correct.
I understand these bills are being, you know, put in place. It sounds like it's to accommodate the Guam Election Commission, but you know, it'd be good to know why, other than they just want the 10 days removed and we're putting an infinite amount of days. I'm sure everyone's going to want to know ultimately when the election gets wrapped up and the votes get certified. But did they have an alternative recommendation besides nothing, from 10 to nothing? If I can ask the sponsor, Madam Speaker.
Well, since this is a little bit of a contentious issue, I would recommend that we make it 15 days, add another 5 days. Does that satisfy you?
I would like an amendment. Yeah, if the sponsor wants to amend it. I think it's just nice that we have some timelines so that I'm sure the Election Commission, they're also under pressure after an election. Everyone wants to know ultimately what the numbers are and have the election certified, but I just don't like the open-ended lack of any timeline at all. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the sponsor for responding to my questions.
Thank you.
We're taking a 1-minute recess. We're back from recess. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on the bill? If not, then the author may close on the bill.
Before we close, Madam Speaker, we have an amendment line authored by myself, Roy A.B. Kanata, to line 5 through 6 and 9, pages 1 and 2, to amend subsection 14105A and C of section 1 of the bill to read as the following: counting provisional ballots within 15 days, and also on the second page, within to 10 to 15 days, again, for after an election. So it provides the mandate for the ballots to be counted within the 15 days.
All right, there's an amendment that's been passed out. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on the amendment? If not, Senator, you may close on the amendment.
I'd like to move it to the third reading file.
Oh, no, on the amendment. So
I mean,
is there
voting file.
Is there any objection to the amendment? Seeing no objection, amendment passes. You may close on the bill, Senator.
Okay, I would just like to move it to the voting file.
All right, on that motion to move the bill as amended to the third reading file, is there any objection? There's an objection?
Okay.
There's an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. Moving the bill as amended to the third reading. Motion fails. All right, we're still on second reading. We're on bill number 218-37. Senator Kanata, you are recognized.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, can I just have a moment real quick? Sorry. Sorry, colleagues, we had technical difficulties.
Madam
Speaker, I move to place Bill 218-37 core, sponsored by Senator Roy A.B. Kanata and co-sponsored by Senator Joe S. Augustine, an act to end to subsections 3104, 3105, 3110, and to the new subsection 3102.1G, Chapter 3, Title 3, Guam Code Annotated, and add subsection 3101.3G, Chapter 3, Title 16, Guam Code Annotated, relative to extending the term and appointment of the registration clerk and the times of registration into the third reading file, and I'd like to speak on it.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill number 218-37 core is a straightforward legislative proposal aimed to enhancing the efficiency of the Guam Election Commission in generating voter rolls ahead of an election. The bill encompasses several amendments, including the establishment of a 21-day window prior to an election during the which electors may register. Additionally, the bill seeks to empower electors to enabling them to register for an election electronically. These amendments are intended to streamline registration process and to ensure more accessible and convenient experience for all voters. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I kindly ask for my colleagues' support on this bill.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, would any senator like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Barnett, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, again, would just similar to my previous lines of questioning, what is the impetus to the time of registration? I mean, right now we can register 10 days prior to any election, but this actually moves it to 21 days. So I'm just worried that, you know, people are used to that window. In fact, I've registered 10 days prior to an election before, and I'm just wondering, why are we making it harder for people to register to vote? If the author would yield to that.
Sorry, would the sponsor yield to that question?
Yes, I do yield. Madam Speaker, it's not really technically that difficult to register to vote. It's accessible at all DMV, all day at DMV. You can also register at 12 o'clock midnight if you want on the online portal. It's very simple. It takes less than 8 minutes to register, and it is available 365 days out of the year on an off season of election. And I understand the senator's previous concern about the 21 days, but I think it's in line with, again, the election analysis report that was done by the Guam Election Commission, and it is simply a request, and it's to, again, make sure that all the documentation and all statistics and data that is collected to ensure that these individuals are correctly or are citizens of the district and are eligible to vote. I hope that satisfies the previous senators.
Sorry, it doesn't, Madam Speaker, because it doesn't make sense. If registering to vote is easier nowadays, then why are we giving people less time to do it? And again, I brought this up in the public hearing. It seems to me like this bill, unfortunately, coming from the Guam Election Commission, is actually restricting voter access. And I would just caution against supporting this measure, especially as we're in an election year currently, ma'am. Nothing further. Sujos Masi.
Sujos Masi. On the bill, Senator Taitigui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, at the public hearing, I asked the question, that same question, as to why they're making it more difficult for people to have the opportunity to, give them more time to register, to vote. And we saw in the last elections one of the lowest turnouts. And even prior to that, there was a huge low turnout. So I asked them, I know that you're doing everything you can, outreach programs, going to the schools, trying to encourage other people to register and to vote, exercise your right. Then why are you doing that, inhibiting or taking away additional timeline for individuals to register? It's contradictive. It doesn't make any sense. And then they mentioned because it gives us more time so that we can get everything together. I said, who are you working for, yourselves or the people of Guam? The people who vote for every one of us. It doesn't come off pretty well, for us to vote on a bill like this, to make it a shorter time period, when the voting turnout was so extremely low in the last two elections, for us to do something like this, especially on the year of an election year. A year of an election year, my friends. Many people don't get that information on how it's changed, how the rules change. They're all going to still think it's 21 days prior. This is a bill I think should wait until after an election, a bill that should have been introduced in it should have been introduced last January. Not on an election year when we're trying to encourage more people to come out and vote. So I have a huge issue with this legislation. And I think many of the people of Guam and those who are listening will probably have the same feeling. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone else who would like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Kanata, if you will look for other senators. Senator Fisher? You may be seated.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to associate myself with the remarks of Senator Teitigui as well as Senator Barnett. We should always be trying to make voting easier for everyone. I think that it would be a good policy to allow registration to vote on the day of the election at the polling place. That is obviously for another bill, but the easier you make it, the better. So I associate myself with the remarks of the prior two speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill. Vice.
On the main motion, Speaker Chalayi, you're recognized.
Sijasmasi. I also share the concerns that have been raised regarding this. So the bill, what it does is changes the time period that a person can register prior to an election from what is currently in law, 10 days prior to an election, you can still register. This changes it to 21 days prior to the election. So it cuts it off earlier. And so I share the concerns that it's more inconvenient for the public, maybe more convenient for the Election Commission, but I guess what really convinces me is that what's the compelling reason to do that? And I read the testimony over and over, and it really just says we've increased registration by all of our different laws that have allowed for different types of registration methods, including driver's license ID. You register when you apply for a license. And all of the outreach efforts by the Guam Election Commission. So I want to thank them for their outreach in which we have increased voter registration. But I just don't think an increase in voter registration is a reason to cut it off any earlier. So the reason that, and you know, I want to say this in a nice way, there wasn't a very compelling reason given during the hearing as to why cut it off, except just convenience. Now, if we have early voting going on, I know that puts a strain on our Guam Election Commission, you know, and they have to, they're not sitting in the office taking registrations and going through the registrations. They're out there working an election polling site. That's for the early voting. However, yeah, they just didn't tie it together in the testimony as to why they're not able to accomplish both at the same time, as they have, actually. And that's what I want to point out. They have been able to do this, and to their credit, and for the benefit of the public. I just support them to continue to do that. And I believe we've tried to make available whatever tools are necessary for the Election Commission to hire temporary staff in order to take care of all of these issues at the same time. Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker.
You're very welcome, Speaker Chalayi. Senator Joseph Augustine, I'll recognize you on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, as I listen to my colleagues, prior election has nothing to do with the turnout, okay? This is about registering. If you don't come to vote, that's nothing to do with registering. The next one is that the last colleague that spoke, let's help them do what they need to do. As you speak against the bill, I'm a co-sponsor of the bill. As you speak against the bill, and you're willing to support the Guam Election Commission, just remember that statement. When we start doing with the budget, and they start saying they need more money, make sure you're ready to say you're going to support them for funds. Okay, I just want to make sure we have that understanding. Reducing the days doesn't hurt the system. It just gets people more involved that, hey, if you really want to vote, you got 21 days, not 10. And if you look at the bill and just follow along, and if you're not in agreement with the bill, you got the power to vote no. But I stand in support. It has nothing to do with the low turnout. The low turnout has nothing to do with registering. It's the people that are registered that don't want to vote. That's another issue. Maybe we need to figure out a way how to convince them to come out and vote. But to register to vote is a separate issue. And this was something that the Guam Legislature Commission supports. And if we're going to turn around and support them, which I'm the oversight chair, when they say they need money for the following reasons, I will turn to my colleagues that said we need to support them to ask them to make sure they give their endorsement on the budget. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, may I rise to a point of information because the retiring speaker had talked about fiscal impact, I'm assuming associated with this bill, but I didn't see any fiscal impact for this particular bill, so I don't know if the author will yield to the alleged fiscal impact.
Thank you for your point of information. I'll leave that to the author in his closing to address. On the bill?
Point of information.
Yes, please state your point of information.
And I just wanted to make clear that during the public hearing, when they talked about the low turnout, that those individuals who are registered, majority of them have exited Guam, have left Guam, moved on. It's encouraging those new 18-year-olds and those who never registered, and that's where the issue is. You can't vote unless you're registered. So just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you for your point of inquiry on the bill. Is there any senator who would like to be recognized on the bill? If not, then the senator sponsor of the bill may close on the bill. Senator Kanata.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I certainly hear my colleagues' reservations on this legislation, but it's also to try to make sure that the precincts and districts that are currently, the poll watchers have a Rolodex that is certified to have all those listed, registered, ready and available to each party, the Republican or Democrat, to make sure that people are casting their votes or need to be possibly called to be reminded of it being election day. That was one of the reasons that this legislation was proffered. I again understand their reservations, but the legislation was intended to try to give a more certified Rolodex of information for those people to kind of get their messages, or what do you call it? Phone calls if they need to be reminded on their election day. So that's really my closing. Nothing further. I move to the third reading file. If no objections.
Masi, on the motion to place the bill on the third reading file, there's been an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion fails. We're now on bill number 219-37 COR. Senator Kanata, you are recognized. 219.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I move to place bill number 219-37 core, sponsored by Senator Roy A.B. Kanata, co-sponsored by Senator Joe San Augustine, an act to amend subsection 117 and to add to subsection 1123, Chapter 1, Title 3, Guam Code Annotated, relative to changing precinct to a district and defining the name of a candidate or nominee, into the third reading file, and I'd like to speak on the bill.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Bill 219-37 redefines a precinct to a district and adds a standardized definition of a name of a candidate or nominee throughout the Guam Election Code. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I just want to inquire, having done a number of elections myself here, we are required already to put our legal names as candidates when we run for office. We have to put what our legal name is on our birth certificate, our passport, and then we are allowed on the actual ballot, if you have a family name, for example, or a name that you're recognized, or a nickname that you're well recognized with, that you're allowed to include. As all of us that have recently picked up packets, you have your card where you will put down what your official name is. And then again, if you have a nickname, if you have a family name you want to put down, you're allowed to do that. So I want to know, how does this change the existing requirement if the sponsor will yield? And then how does that affect the ability of candidates also to put an identifying name that they may have, that they would like to have included on the ballot, as we've traditionally had for many years, as far back as I can remember? I just want clarification, because this bill seems to be focused on your legal name as a candidate.
Would the sponsor yield to the question?
I yield to the question, Madam Speaker. Thank you to the previous speaker. The voting district is being changed to the village, right? From precinct, because there's precincts inside the village. So we're just changing that one. And then the legislation is pushing it into the birth certificate name. The names of your nicknames and family names are still available to be inputted, and they won't be affected by this legislation. They're like kind of a subtext of the main.
I appreciate the explanation, but we're already required, as far as I know, to put what our legal name is. Is there a situation where candidates are putting not their legal name? Because it's clarified to us that we must identify our legal name. Not our nicknames, not our, whatever, however we want to be recognized, but our legal names are required to be put down already. So how does this change the current requirement for your legal name?
Are you asking the sponsor to yield?
Yes, I am, Madam Speaker.
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
It's quite extensive in allowing this. I just grab my computer for a second here so I can read it. It says here, in the case of a candidate or nominee, the word name shall mean the name that appears on his or her United States birth certificate, United States passport, certificate of naturalization, court-ordered name change, certificate of marriage, or any identification meeting the Real ID Act, requirements issued by a state. Anywhere the title name appears, the definition shall apply. How does this change the already existing requirement that we have to use our legal names as candidates? Is it expanding on it? I mean, is my name any different from, well, your name could be different from your birth certificate if you change your name when you get married, or you take initiative to have a name change. Some people do that. But I just want to know, how does this change the already existing requirement of requiring your legal name when you're running as a candidate?
Thank you.
Senator, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to the previous senator. The intent is to clear up the law and make sure that it is in the law, if that answers her question.
I just want to clarify, is it not in the law now? Because we've always been required to put down our legal names as candidates. What is not clarified in the existing law that we're amending it? I don't see existing language that we're crossing out and adding new language. I just see, aside from the precinct being changed to the village, I don't see existing language being crossed out that changes what's in the law. I was just at election commission last week. They tell you when they hand you your packet, hand you your card there, they tell you, this is where you put your legal name. And then you have a second slot there at the bottom if you have a nickname or family name or whatever the case may be that you might like to put there next to your name, so that people can identify you, or they may know you particularly by a certain name or nickname. So what are we changing the existing law now that we're adding all this, which to my understanding has always been my understanding?
Are you asking him to yield again, Senator?
Yes, Madam Speaker,
All right.
I am. Thank you.
Would the sponsor yield?
Madam Speaker, I ask for a moment's recess.
There's been a request for a recess. We'll take a 1-minute recess. We're back from recess. So we had left off, Senator Brown had posed a question to the sponsor. The sponsor had agreed to yield. Senator Kanata, you're recognized to yield to Senator Brown.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to Senator Brown for her reservations and questioning earlier. So the situation with the name, there was an incident in the previous election that an individual used a name that wasn't what was on their birth certificate. So we're just trying to codify this and make it an actual law that people use their legal birth name that's on documentation and have it just codified in the section. So there's really no name position in the law, and GEC has been successful in making ruling in-house, but they're trying to make it law now. If that clarifies the situation earlier.
Senator Brown, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the explanation. I mean, as was noted by our other colleague, Senator Fisher, the law does require on our petitions that we provide our legal name. So if it allows consistency across the board, which is what we always assumed, and you know, as recently as last week, you know, I was told by the Election Commission I'd had to, which is not an issue, but you know, provide your legal name. So I appreciate that we will address the consistency. If the Election Commission did not verify in a previous election what the legal name of a candidate was, and that's an issue for that candidate and the Election Commission for not verifying. I mean, we're not asked when we show up at the Election Commission to provide identification. Just like now, you don't really have to verify your citizenship. They randomly are assuming you're a citizen when you're registered to vote, which is a separate issue that concerns me, but we'll deal with that on another day. Thank you very much to the sponsor, and thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to ask these questions.
Senator Brown. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Taitagui on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just clarification through legal, if this bill has two subject matters, is it considered to be germane with one talks about the name and the other one talks about changing precinct to district. There are two subject matters, and was just wanting to know if this is considered germane or allowed to have two subject matters in one bill.
Council reports that she had reviewed the bills and that she did not raise that as an issue on this bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, but okay, well, thank you. I think my colleague might speak on that. Thank you.
On the bill, is there any other senator who'd like to speak on the bill? Senator Blas, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I appreciate the concern. I mean, I have to agree with the concern raised by the gentle lady from Tamuning, and while legal counsel did not raise the concern, it does not mean it was addressed. Our bylaws, our standing rules clearly state one bill, one subject. Okay, and if we're going to stretch it by saying that it's because it was on the Guam Election Commission, one talks about name, the other one talks about village. How? Okay? It's like buying Oreo cookies in the fish in the fish section. Now, we don't mean to raise the issue and the concern. I'm sure there's a simple fix to it. It's just that it's a matter of that she brought up, and I have to agree with her on that. Fix is simply notwithstanding. No, I'm serious. Just because you're going to Happy Mart, you're going to buy Oreo cookies. You don't go to the fish section. Take a recess and fix it. Thank you.
On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? There's been no finding of violation of standing rules if no one's challenged it. There was only a question as to what legal counsels determined.
Then I challenge it, Madam Speaker. If that's giving me technical,
All right,
I'll
then
challenge it.
then you're challenging whether the bill is, the two topics in the bill are germane, or whether the bill has a germane.
Yes, ma'am. You know, I didn't want it to
All
get
right.
this far, but you, okay?
See to the Smossy, Senator. Yeah, so my ruling with discussion from legal is that the section in the bill that are being changed, both are from Chapter 1 of Title 3, the Guam Election Code, and they're both dealing with definitions in the Guam Election Code, so I find it to be germane. So that is my ruling, unless there's another motion.
Okay.
On the bill, is there any other senator who would like to speak on the bill? On the bill. If there's no one else to speak on the bill, then the sponsor may close on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding House rules, I move to vote for the bill or move it to the third reading file.
All right, so there's been a motion to move the bill to the third reading. Is there any objection? There's an objection? All in favor of the motion to place the bill on third, please raise your hand. Motion fails. We're now on bill number 233-37 LS. Senator Kanata, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to recess until Wednesday at 9 a.m.
The motion to recess till Wednesday at 9. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, recess until 9 a.m.